Welcome back to the Draft Dynasty Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. It is the day of the NFL Draft in 2025. Welcome to another year of NFL Draft excitement, drama, whatever you want to call it. We are here for it. We've been leading up to it all off season here, and it is finally here. I'm joined by my good buddy Andrew Wilbar here on the Draft Dynasty Podcast. It is all draft all the time, and Andrew, this is the time of the year for us that it all comes to a head. How you feeling, man?
I am feeling absolutely wonderful. It is so exciting to finally be here on the day of the draft. Is absolutely wonderful feeling. All of the work that we put in the last few months is finally coming to fruition. Everything's about done. And this is kind of a final preview show. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I got my fans first mic. Looking forward to doing some live stuff over the during the draft for FSN.
We are going to be live streaming from steelcurtainnetwork.com, the draft, or not the Draft Dynasty, the Fans First Sports Network on those YouTube channels, and then on Jeff Hartman's X profile and on Facebook from our pages there. So check that out if you want live coverage of the entire NFL draft. We'll have different crews on at different times. Andrew and I will be there for the majority of both the first 2 days, and then Andrew's going to pop in and out on Saturday. I'll be there for most of Saturday too, and we'll just be breaking it all down as the picks come. Live analysis. We're going to be breaking the picks probably before you see them on TV in a lot of cases, because we're going to follow it along on X. So just be aware of that. If you're wanting to see the picks come down the pipe live with Roger Goodell, then don't tune in to us. But if you want a little bit of extra content and getting ahead of schedule on it a little bit, we will be leaking the picks as they come out. So tune in. We hope you do. Fans First Sports Network YouTube channel, Steel Curtain Network YouTube channel, and Facebook pages as well. Andrew, we're just going to dive right into this. We were going to do like our full mock drafts, but neither of us at the time of this recording have them finalized quite yet. Mine's up live on the website. Yours is still in process, but I'm going to be making some revisions to mine. There was a lot of new information that came out on Wednesday that changes up how we view this. So I think the better way to do this is just to kind of break down our predictions and thoughts for all 32 teams. So we're just going to run through these, and we don't have to spend a lot of time, Andrew, on the first probably 3-4 picks of this draft. I think it's pretty chalk. Can we go ahead and say that the Titans definitely taking Cam Ward? Sounds like Cleveland's taking Travis Hunter. There's been some intrigue that the Giants are trying to get out of 3, but I think they end up just sticking there at 3 and taking Abdul Carter. And then it sounds like Will Campbell to the Patriots is almost a foregone conclusion at this point. Anything you want to throw in there for those 4 picks?
I've heard a few rumors that teams like the Cowboys could be potentially looking at moving with the Browns at number 2 for Travis Hunter.
Sure.
I just don't see how they get it done. I'm not betting on that. Would I be completely shocked if it happened? No, it's Jerry Jones. It could be. And then with the Patriots at 4, I still would not rule out a player like Jalen Walker. I think he would be a fit for Mike Vrabel's defense. Again, I don't think I'm going to mock that in this final mock draft. As I'm just doing the finishing touches on it. Right now, I do have the Steelers taking Will Campbell, or the Patriots, taking Will Campbell there. It's not a great home run selection, but it's a single, maybe a double for them. And if you're in New England, you got to protect your quarterback, so you take the best option you can get.
Yeah, I mean, Drake May is their team. It's their future. He's their star. I mean, at this point, that's the trajectory he's on, so you protect him. And even if it's not a great top end of the draft for tackles, Will Campbell has a lot of good tape, and so I think that the Patriots, if they're in love with him, they're going to take him there. Those top 4 picks are pretty much set in stone for me. And then at 5, it gets a little interesting. In my original mock, I had the Jaguars taking Mason Graham just because they didn't address defensive tackle. But I really do start to think that they're going to jump on an offensive player here. And I think that person's Ashton Genty personally. There's been some Ted McMillan talk. Are you buying the surge in thought that the Jaguars are going to be pursuing offensive playmakers, or do you think that they are going to probably do what would be the smart thing and take Mason Graham? I mean, he's your 4th ranked player in this class. He deserves to be taken here by a team that desperately needs him, really.
Yeah, I don't know that I fully agree with what Jacksonville might do here, but I understand you want to support your quarterback that you're paying a lot of money to, and he not brought back the results they were hoping for. So I am okay with them going philosophically offense. I don't see how you can justify taking Ted McMillan this high. Ted McMillan's not even in my top right as of right now. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but I do question sometimes his overall effort. He obviously, we have the speed concerns with him. I would be fine. I am right on the brink of making Emeka Egbuka the number 4 receiver and putting that's including Travis Hunter as well, and moving Ted McMillan down to the wide receiver 5 if you're counting Travis Hunter. I've got Golden, I've got Burden, I've got Egbuka all ahead of him right now, just barely, but I do. So that's where I'm at with McMillan. I think there's a major reach if they take him at 5. I'm going to give them Genty. Not that I don't think they could take McMillan, but when I'm doing a mock, I'm also trying to cut my losses if I'm wrong. Whereas if I'm wrong with McMillan, that causes a huge problem all the way down the top 10. Whereas if I take Genty and they don't take him, he's going to be gone in the next pick or two anyways. So I don't feel like it's going to throw off the entire mock.
Yeah, and there has been some talk that the Bears are really trying to get up to 5 and take Genty there. The Jags would not mind moving out, I don't think, but their ability to land a playmaker on offense to help out Trevor Lawrence, help out that group under Liam Cohen is going to be one of the major driving points. This is where things can change quickly in the draft, is at pick 5. And then at pick 6, if you're the Raiders, if Genty's gone, I think you're looking at Mason Graham here, or maybe Armand Membu if you really want to get into the what they need for offensive line. It sounds like that they're not picking up the 5th-year option, or sorry, they're not extending one of their offensive linemen here, and they could use a tackle. So there's a chance that he's in play there. Excuse me. If you had to pick between Mason Graham, Armand Membu, and maybe the field, is it one of those 2 players here for you?
This is the toughest one for me to project. If Genty is not there, or even if he is there, maybe there's not a guarantee that the Raiders take him. I think I would bet, if I had to bet, I'd probably say Graham is the safest bet, but I would not put much confidence in it. I think there is no option that's above a 50% chance with the Raiders right now. Yeah. I would put him at about a 40% chance. I'd put, obviously you throw Genty in there. I would put Jalen Walker in that consideration as well. They could go edge. I know they don't need that, but the rumor on the street is that in a draft that nobody really likes this class as a whole, they're just going to get pass rushers. They know that's the strength of this draft, and it's the second most important thing behind the quarterback. So if the quarterback's not there and the value doesn't present itself anywhere else, you could see the run on edge rushers and defensive linemen run early. If I'm them, I'm taking Mason Graham, hands down. They could use an extra defensive lineman. You pair him with who they bring in, Christian Wilkins. You pair those 2 together, that's an incredible interior defensive line. So I think that'd be a great pick for him. For Pete Carroll's defense, absolutely. I would not shock me, though, if they went edge rusher here with a guy like maybe you see Shamar Stewart even, but if I had to bet, probably Jalen Walker would be the edge rusher if they went that direction.
Yeah, Daniel Jeremiah has him taking Kelvin Banks Jr. here. So there's been some late rising up the board for Kelvin Banks, and it makes sense. So I'm probably going to say they're going to go Membo here, Mason Graham here if Genty's off the board. And I could be wrong, but we'll see how that plays out. Going to the Jets, you have to think that if Membu's there, that he's in the conversation. But I mean, a lot of people, Peter Schrager, who had the most accurate mock draft in of all the pundits last year, he has them going Tyler Warren, and he seemed pretty confident about it. That makes sense to me from how they evaluate people in that front office. It's kind of a wacky system up there, but Warren is considered a blue chip talent in this draft. They might want to go ahead and add him to this team.
He makes sense. He'd be a good fit for them. I still think there's a chance the Jets could take a Jedi Barron if he's still here. I think Jedi Barron's in play as high as 6. Will Johnson, with the injury concern, if teams don't view Will Johnson that highly, corner has become a much more important position, and the depth at corner really is not great this year. You've got a few second-round prospects, but after you get out of that second round, there's a significant drop off from the second round talent to what's left after that. So if you're a team that needs it, you got to take one early. If you're going to get one at all, there's rumors Max Harrison could go inside the top 20. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but a lot of rumors floating around. I think that if you're the Jets, though, Barron makes sense. Pair him with Sauce Gardner. He'd be a good fit for Aaron Glenn's defense, what he wants to do. Tyler Warren makes sense. I still think I would say that the Jets would be the floor for Armand Membu. I do not think Armand Membu lasts past pick 7.
Okay. Yep, I agree with that. He's who I have mocked to them in mine currently. So I like that one. Okay, the Panthers. If Jalen Walker's there, this feels like it's a locked and loaded pick, right?
Oh yeah, I would definitely think so. If not, maybe his teammate, Michael Williams.
Michael Williams. Yep. That's who I have going to the Saints next is Michael Williams.
Okay.
There's a lot of smoke going that way, and I think that he is, if you're playing for athletic profile, he's got length, he's got quickness. He projects as a guy who could be really good at the NFL level. And the Saints do a good job developing their talent overall that they draft. So I think that that's a good fit there. Then when you get to Chicago, Andrew, the intrigue continues again. Are they going with an offensive lineman? Are they going with an edge rusher or, an offensive playmaker? I have them going with I had them going with Tyler Warren. I think Tyler Warren's going to go to the Jets, though, so I might have to adjust there too. If that's the case, for me, this is the spot for Kelvin Banks Jr. I think that he's a guy that they would really like at this spot. So give me KBJ to the Chicago Bears.
The follow up on the Saints, real quick. I think, if the Jaguars are taking Ted McMillan, then I don't care what the Bears are offering me. If they're offering me a slice of bread, I'm taking it and going down to 10 because I know I can get them. And I just hope it's a good slice of bread. But if pick 9 to me is where I think ideally you see some trade action start.
Sure.
That's where I have kind of my pen circling that 9th pick there. If the Saints aren't taking a quarterback there, they could always get some ammo, go back to be able to use that ammo to trade back up in late round 1, or if they want to get some in a future year as well. I think the Saints would be willing to trade back if they don't have a quarterback they love. So I'm looking at a team like maybe the Indianapolis Colts, if they want to go up and get up a tight end or an offensive lineman of their choice. I think the Miami Dolphins may have to move up if they want to get a guy like Calvin Banks at this point, which is crazy to think about. And I think if you want a really big, really, further out trade, I think a team like the Rams, if you're looking at tight end, you could see if you want an earth-shattering trade. Another team I'm
looking at the Broncos there too. The Broncos coming up.
Broncos.
Yep.
Although I will say, I think that would be more if Genty is for some reason still on the board. I think that this is where Denver makes that move up for Genty. But if the Saints are there, I agree with you, Michael Williams. And then for the Bears, Kelvin Banks makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't rule out a guy like Mike Green if he's there. He makes a lot of philosophical sense for them too as an edge rusher. Who knows? Mason Graham might still be available.
Yeah, they would love that. If Mason Graham's there, I think that they would run that pick up. Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. Okay, so San Francisco at pick 11, they're difficult for me. I have Will Johnson going there in my original, but again, after I shake up this top 10 after the rumors, this may change too. But Will Johnson, that slide, if it starts, it could go for a while.
It really could. When you look at the teams that quote unquote need corner, they also need defensive linemen. There's a lot of defensive line. As much as I love Will Johnson, I still have him as a top 10 prospect in this class. Still do. I'm not wavering from that. There are players that have less concerns and higher floors than Will Johnson, not just because of the injury, but you do have the questions about, speed, whatever, whatnot, because he isn't running well now. Me personally, I'm not concerned about the speed. I've seen enough on tape. This guy's got plenty of speed to be able to be an elite corner in the NFL. That's just me. I think that if you're a team like the Arizona Cardinals, Will Johnson would make a lot of sense, but so could Derek Harmon. So could Kenneth Grant. So could any edge rusher that's there. They need help along the defensive side of the ball anywhere. And if those guys are going right there, I think that's the spot where Arizona probably targets. Atlanta's in a similar situation, just anywhere on the defense, just add something. They need talent. But man, yeah, Will Johnson would be a guy. I think the highest he goes is 11, but I really don't even see that happening at this point.
Yeah.
I really think San Francisco, Walter Nolan is an
Yes.
option there, I think, for them. This is another offensive tackle spot. Kelvin Banks, if he's still there, like all of a sudden, all these teams that need tackle all of a sudden are valuing it. Would we rule out the idea of a Josh Simmons going this high? I don't think we should rule that out. Maybe with this is a spot where if San Francisco wants to trade back, or I think Dallas is even better since we're going into Dallas here at 12. I think Dallas is intriguing as a team that if they don't move up, maybe they move down, and you have a team like Houston that is looking for an offensive tackle, or even Kansas City in the late first round. They give up a significant amount to keep their young quarterback healthy. And I know that the Texans have done a lot of homework on Kelvin Banks. So if he's still there, I think at 11, 12 range, maybe the Texans are willing to move up significantly and go and get their guy.
It very well could be. When you get to pick 12 with the Cowboys, it's intriguing here too. But I think if they're going to stick and pick, it's down to 3 players for me here. It's Ted McMillan, it's Matthew Golden, or Omarion Hampton here for me. One of those 3 guys is going to be the pick at 12 for the Cowboys if they're unable to move up for Genty, and if they decide to stick and pick. One of those 3 guys. Does anybody else sneak into that conversation for you?
Not really, but what I think makes it so intriguing is that all 3 of those players in certain scenarios could still be available at pick 25 if they were to make a trade with the Houston Texans. Yeah, I mean, there's not that many teams that have a dire need at wide receiver. Unless the Steelers trade George Pickens, I don't think they'll take receiver first round. They could, but if other than that, I mean, you think of Denver, they're still there. You got Seattle. I think they'd be one team that could potentially look at a guy like McMillan. But beyond that, you've got Green Bay. I mean, there's not that many other teams that could take a receiver. Would you rather take a Ted McMillan at 12 or an Emeka Egbuka at 25, even if he's not your preferred option? I'm still taking Emeka Egbuka at 25. The value's better. I'm getting extra for it. Maybe do you take Travion Henderson there at 25 if Hampton's for some reason off the board? That would be the other name I would add.
Yeah, it could be. My favorite idea is Ted McMillan to the Cowboys because of what he could do for CeeDee Lamb, work in the middle of the field. Ted McMillan on the boundary is a nightmare, in my opinion, even though the speed's not quite there. His ability to go up and get the football, his nuance on the outside is very, very good. And I just think that he's a solid pick at that spot for a team that needs some help on that side of the ball. There was a very intriguing trade for the Miami Dolphins in Daniel Jeremiah's most recent mock draft that he put out. He had the Broncos trading up ahead of the Colts to land Colson Loveland, and in process, Miami moving back and selecting Malachi Starks later. Peter Schrager had Malachi Starks going to, it wasn't Peter Schrager. It was Charlie Campbell from Walter Football, who his mock drafts are really good. He usually has a really accurate mock at the end of the year. He's got them pegged for Malachi Starks. Malachi Starks to the Dolphins is, he said that he would bank on it. And that's really interesting for him to potentially go that high. Makes sense if the Broncos wanted to move up for an offensive playmaker of some kind ahead of the Colts. If that's Colson Loveland, if that's one of the wide receivers, if that's a running back, whatever. Want to trade back, then they could take him there. But is that on the board for you, or are you thinking that they kind of stick and pick and maybe it's best offensive lineman available? Maybe they reach on Starks here. What say you?
I even though I have Malachi Starks around 20 in my big board, I don't consider it much of a reach because I have all these guys graded similarly between 10 and 23, 24. And then there's a drop off with I'm pretty much already into second round grades. So there's a lot of mid first round prospects in this draft. And then once you hit about the 24th, 25th player, you're looking at guys who, in my opinion, have second round grades. So even though I have him rated lower than 13, I don't have a problem with the Dolphins taking him here. He's a great fit. He's a great football player. I love Malachi Starks, watching him play the game. Great free safety would be a great fit for them in the defense. I do think offensive line is something they need to consider. But again, we've talked about all these teams that could take Kelvin Banks. Maybe the reason Starks may be such an intriguing fit for them is because they know they can't get a Banks or a Membu or a Campbell because all 3 of them will be gone by this point.
Yeah. I had Malachi Starks going to Washington at 29 because that's one of my favorite fits in the entire draft. And he was still there on the board. It made sense to me, but his stock could be higher than we think or than I've thought throughout the process here. If he goes at 13 to Miami, that would shake things up for the back end of the draft. The Colts at 14. If one of those tight ends is there, that's the pick, right?
I would think so. If not, Tyler Booker.
Tyler Booker. Okay. What about, is this a sneaky spot for Shedeur Sanders at 14?
No.
Okay. I agree. Okay. Let's move on to the Atlanta Falcons. I've had them pegged for Mike Green since the foundations of this draft. What say you about that?
I think Mike Green's a good fit. I wouldn't rule out James Pierce Jr. I hear he's rising up again. Tennessee would make a lot of sense schematically for them. And then Kenneth Grant and Derek Harmon. I think those are the four guys that they would consider. And there, it's going to be defensive tackle or defensive end. I feel pretty confident in saying that as of right now.
All right. Before we get to the break, let's do this for the Arizona Cardinals, the 16th pick in the draft. They are the halfway point. I have the Cardinals taking Jahad Campbell out of Alabama. He just feels like a Jonathan Gannon player, but they could go a number of different directions here. They could go with a corner. They could go with a defensive tackle or an edge rusher here as well. Jahad Campbell kind of fills multiple spots for you. I think he can rush the passer on third down. I think he can play off the ball. Let's say it's Isaiah Simmons 2.0, where you hopefully get it right this time with Campbell for the Cardinals. But that's my pick here for them. But I could see them going a number of different directions. But it feels like defense for me. Sneaky, maybe Matthew Golden to pair with Marvin Harrison Jr. But is it defense for you as well here?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much copy-paste situation from Atlanta with the caveat maybe they could go receiver. I wouldn't rule out McMillan, maybe Golden. Maybe they trade down and they take a guy like Ibuka. I know Arizona would love to trade down too. They don't have that many picks. This is an ideal spot. I don't know what team would be moving up in this spot for. Maybe a team wants to move up for Will Johnson, someone like that. But I definitely think Arizona, if they can't move out, they probably are copy-paste situation. Edge, defensive tackle, maybe corner, but in a very similar situation to Atlanta.
Yeah, if somebody wanted to hop the Bengals for one of the guards, like Gray Zabel or Tyler Booker, if they're still there, the Texans could do that too, especially if the tackles are gone by that point. So that's an option there. The other team that I look at is, say, Will Johnson's still on the board. Buffalo could make a zooming move up the board for a guy like Will Johnson. And then Shedeur Sanders is the wild card for this whole first round. So maybe a team like Cleveland or the New York Giants says, screw it, let's go up, let's get our guy and chill until the third round. That would make sense to me, as well as kind of a trade back spot here for the Arizona Cardinals. All right, we're going to go ahead and take our break. When we come back, we're diving into picks 17 through 32, making predictions for the rest of the 32 teams in the NFL draft. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. And we're back here. Oh, goodness. Welcome back. We are breaking down our final pre-draft predictions for all 32 teams. We just went through the first half of the draft and kind of talked through each of the individual squads and which direction we think they might be going, whether that's specific players, whether that's specific directions, trade candidates, things like that. So we're going to continue that theme here going into the second half. And we're going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals at pick 17 to get us started for the second half of the draft here. And Andrew, I think the way the draft plays out, this is one of those teams that could be looking either at edge or offensive line at this spot in the draft. And in this case, the way we've played it out, it seems like that they would have their pick of Gray Zabel, Tyler Booker, Shamar Stewart still on the board. There's a couple other edge rushers out there. Donovan Ezeraku is still out there. And, some other guys that would make sense for them at this spot. Is that kind of how you see this going for the Bengals? Are they going to be zeroed in on edge rusher, offensive line, or do you see them maybe going in another direction?
I think if they value the quarterback position enough and keeping Joe Burrow healthy, I could very well see them going offensive line. I don't think Gray's able would be a terrible pick. It's not something that I've mocked this far into the process, but it's an option there. I'm hearing a lot of rumors he could go anywhere in that 13 to 18 range. He could be available. I do think that it would be very poor management to not give a strong look at the edge rushers in this class. Mm-hmm. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Shamar Stewart just because of the lack of production. I think he's a big risk, but he's a schematic fit for what they want to do on the defensive side of the ball. They need something there. If Mike Green was there, he'd be a great fit. If he falls past Atlanta, you're talking about even, I don't think Mykal Williams is there, but there's going to be some sort of pass rusher there. I think they need to consider that. And if not, you could even argue they could add to the interior of their defensive line as well, defensive tackle. This is yet another spot for a Derek Harmon or Kenneth Grant. I think this is where it's coming full circle where, okay, we expected there to be more defensive linemen in the later portion of the first round. That's not a given with all these teams in the middle that still need to add at that position.
Yeah, I agree. So let's move on to the Seattle Seahawks then. And this is for sure offensive line or wide receiver, in my opinion. And I think that they go offensive line again. And these receivers continue to fall down the board a little bit in the first round here. So I don't know how you see the Seattle Seahawks going. I have them taking Tyler Booker in my final mock draft. So what direction do you see the Seahawks going?
I would agree with that probably. I think if Tedero McMillan is still there, he's a guy that they would consider taking here. Yep. I think that's where I had him mock 4.0. I had him going there. I'm still considering, as of the time of this recording, I'll have it out again in the morning, but as of right now, I'm debating between that and a guy like a Gray Zabel here. I've heard that I don't really buy the rumors that he could go as high as 12. It doesn't seem like a guy the Cowboys would take that high, maybe on a trade back. I could be wrong. There's no way I would take Gray Zabel quite that high. I picked 12. Mm-hmm. I just don't think the upside warrants itself as an interior offensive lineman. At least that's where he projects best in the NFL. But I think McMillan is a guy to keep an eye on. Tyler Booker can't be ruled out here. I think he's a good schematic fit for the power running game. I think there's a lot of things to like about what he brings to the table. And, maybe they pull the trigger a little bit early on a Matthew Golden or Mecca Buka, any of those guys. But I definitely think this is going to be an offensive pick. They're going to add some pieces around Sam Darnold. And the defense side of the ball, there's areas they could improve, but there's not one area where you look at it's like, man, they've got to fix something right there. There's a pretty solid unit overall. They have time to wait a little bit. They have some young pieces. I think they can focus a little bit more on offense here.
Does Shedeur Sanders interest you at all if you're Seattle?
Atmospherically, I would say yes. I think be a good culture fit in Seattle. I do not see that happening, though.
Yeah, I agree. All right, number 19, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Okay, this is where in my mock draft, I have the trade up from the second round happening to go get Shedeur Sanders. I have the Cleveland Browns sending their second round pick to the Buccaneers, and so pick 33, pick 67, and then a 2026 pick as well to move up in to this spot and land Shedeur Sanders. The Buccaneers, in my scenario, they miss out on Jahad Campbell, who went to the Arizona Cardinals. So, and there's been rumors that they've been looking to move back. So if somebody wanted to jump in front of the Steelers, this felt like a good spot to do so for Shedeur Sanders. So that's what I had going on. If they stick and pick, though, I think one of the cornerbacks, maybe Will Johnson, if he's still there at this point, Jahdae Barron, if he's still there at this point, it could be an edge rusher or one of those defensive tackles as well, Andrew.
Yeah, there's a ton of options here for Tampa Bay. That's very hard to pinpoint. I think this could be a sneaky spot for a safety, Malachi Starks or Nick Emenwari. I think that would be something that teams would consider here. I think Jahad Campbell, this is a great schematic fit for him. I think this is the best landing spot of any, getting to learn from Levante David. I would love to see him go to Tampa Bay, be a great fit for him. I think receiver could be in play as well. Again, we're talking, this is the ideal range I would think of a McMillan going. If Jacksonville doesn't take him at 5, maybe Dallas pulls the trigger at 12, but ideally, if you want value, I think you're waiting until about around pick 20. I do know that Tampa Bay has done a lot of homework on Donovan Ezraku. I think if he's still here at this time, he'd be a fit for them. Of course, Tampa is a very 3-4. They've been 3-4 defense for quite some time, and he'd be that guy with the bend around the edge and that length to be able to get home and be that high sack number pass rusher. Still needs to get stronger against the run, but I think he'd fit what Todd Bowles wants to do on defense.
Is Shamar Stewart off the board by pick 19 for you?
I've debated whether giving him to Cincinnati or not. It's not finalized yet. I'm going to bet and say he is off the board.
Yeah.
But someone's got to drop with all these guys that are rising. If Zabel's rising, if all these offensive linemen are going, and some of these other edge rushers like Pierce and Green, all these guys are off, someone's got to drop. Not everybody can go inside the top 20. So if there's one guy who falls significantly, I think Stewart is the most logical one just because he didn't produce.
Yeah, I think the other one is Will Johnson because of the lack of faith in his measurables and things like that. But that makes sense to me here. And then we talked about the Denver Broncos as potentially being a trade-up candidate for one of those offensive playmakers. Don't need to spend a lot of time on them, but this feels like maybe the floor for Omarion Hampton, or maybe the range for Omarion Hampton, where it starts even at 20. So floor is not the right word to use, but they could be long gone for a wide receiver at this point, or a tight end as well. If Matthew Golden's still on the board at pick 20, I think the Broncos run that one up to the board.
That's possible. I've also heard Nick Emenwari. I mentioned him with Tampa Bay. I think he's an option here. I think one way or the other, Denver either trades up or they trade back if they have an option to. Question is, will they get a call? If they don't get a chance to move up for a guy like Genty, I think that Denver is an option. If there is a team that wants Shedeur Sanders ahead of the Steelers, if they think the Steelers are going to take him, you've got to get the Denver spot at 20. So I think Denver's going to use that as far as, hey, if you want to come out and get Shedeur Sanders, you better trade up with us because we're ahead of Pittsburgh. Yeah. So they're an option to potentially move back. When you're looking at the roster as a whole, they don't have a bad roster in general, but they do need to add an extra offensive weapon. Wouldn't surprise me with Hampton. I don't feel like they've shown him a ton of attention during the pre-draft process, but sometimes I read too much into that. So I don't want to make that sound as if, he's definitely not an option for them. But I think Emenwari, if they go defensive side of the ball, he completes what they're trying to do there. And I wouldn't rule out receiver either.
Yeah. Okay. At 21, I've been pegging Derek Harmon to the Steelers, throughout this whole thing. He's in my final mock draft here. You have them trading back actually in our Steelers mock drafts that we did for the Steel Curtain Network. And when you look at Pittsburgh, I mean, they're the ideal candidate to want to trade back. I mean, they've got plenty of needs. The guys that they've been showing the most interest in are the late day one, early day two type guys at a multitude of positions. They could want to move back enough to get a late first round, maybe a late second rounder in there if they're lucky, or an early third in a trade back scenario. Finding the partner is going to be the issue. If Shedeur Sanders is there at 21, do you think the Steelers take him? Everybody's picking him to go there. I don't see it happening either way, but I think they would at least have to consider it at that point.
I'm sure it's something that they've definitely considered. They've done a lot of homework on Shedeur. I am still not convinced, just like you, that the Steelers are not all in on Shedeur Sanders. I believe that there is more smoke than anything to generate either somebody to move up ahead of them and get another player to fall to them at 21, or it is leverage for them to potentially move back as well. Because when the Steelers are fielding calls to move back, I understand a scenario in which maybe you think Sanders is gone, so you want to have an option to trade back if he's not there. But to me, if the Steelers are aggressively looking to trade back, like they've been making calls to some teams about potentially moving back. If that's the case, then why? That's where I stopped believing that the Steelers are really all in on Shedeur Sanders, because then you'd be hearing more, okay, are the Steelers looking to trade up? When have we heard a rumor about the Steelers have contacted a certain team about trading up to that spot? We haven't heard it. So I don't believe the Steelers are all in on Shedeur. I think they like Shedeur Sanders about how they liked Kenny Pickett. And I hope the Steelers are wise enough to realize they made a mistake the first time by liking a guy, but not having conviction about him, that he can be a franchise-altering guy. So that's where I've come down on it. I think the Steelers just as equally like Jalen Milroe, and I think he could be just as obvious an option if he falls to them on a trade back, or even in round 2 if they get a second-round pick either by trading back or trading away George Pickens.
My bold take is if it's a selection for the Steelers at 21. It will not be a quarterback, but it's no holds barred after that. If they trade back to 30, 31, then they can do whatever they want to at that point. And I've been saying since the get-go, I don't think any more than 2 quarterbacks go on night one, but and I think that the consensus has kind of come around on that too. But Jackson Dart could be in play for teams later in the first round. Milroe, you had him going to the Steelers at one point in a mock draft scenario after a trade back in the first round. So those types of quarterbacks are going to be in play late on day one, but I still don't think it happens here yet. This is the Shedeur Sanders range still for me. And I think if somebody wanted to come up and take Shedeur Sanders at 21, the Steelers would be fine moving back for that to be allowed as well. So that is kind of my stance on our favorite team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Any other thoughts on Pittsburgh before we move on to the Chargers?
Not really. I think you hit everything, all the points there with Shedeur. I very much feel like the teams don't know what to do with Shedeur in mock draft, so they're just, okay, let's just throw him in somewhere so we have to find a spot for him and make it look good in our mock draft because we think he's going to find a way in somehow. I really do not get a strong feeling that it is Shedeur, and if it is, to be perfectly honest, I'm not going to be the most happy person on earth.
Yeah. Pittsburgh needs a quarterback. They've got to be desperate for one. That's all that we're hearing in the national media. So Shedeur Sanders, he's got to go there if he's still there. I mean, they would just be silly to pass on him. And if he doesn't go there, where are we going to put him? That's just excuse making for mock drafters who don't know where to put Shedeur Sanders in their mock. So I think he's going to be gone by then. So it may be a moot point anyway. But okay, on to the Chargers. I've got Kenneth Grant going here in my mock draft. This would be a sweet spot for him going back to play for Jim Harbaugh. But it does kind of feel like that the Chargers could go a number of different directions too, based on who's left on the board. I don't think that they're married to one side of the ball or a certain position necessarily. But, if Will Johnson's still available here, that would make sense too for a team that needs a corner.
I think this is the floor for 3 Michigan players: Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson, and Colston Loveland. If for some reason, though, I understand there's a lot of teams that like Colston Loveland just as much, if not more, than Tyler Warren. But what teams are those? Are those the ones that are actually picking them? Or is it teams in the back half of the first round? Because if all of these guys go early on, like the Saints could take a tight end, but I think they're more likely to go edge rusher. The Panthers could take tight end. I think they're more likely to go edge rusher. The Chicago Bears could, and if Tyler Warren's there, I think they would consider him long and hard if he's there. Do they like Colston Loveland enough to take him above, say, a Calvin Banks or someone along the offensive line? We don't know the answer to that. Maybe they do. I wouldn't rule out Colston Loveland to the Bears. But there's not that many other teams. Okay, the Colts, they could consider a tight end. I think that's probably the most logical landing spot. But what if they want to add Tyler Booker instead at the offensive line? Or if they want one of the safeties, if Starks happens to fall to them or Emin Warrior's there, they need help at safety too. So that's not like tight end's the only option for them. And if he falls past Indianapolis, he could drop a bit. I think Denver would consider him at 20 if they're still stuck there, even though they added Evan Ingram, have 2 tight end sets. But other than that, you could see a drop by Colston Love, and he'd be that surprise guy that nobody's expecting to fall that could just because of positional value. I wouldn't rule it entirely out. I wouldn't bet on it, but I'd say there's maybe a 10% chance he's still hanging around here or close to it. And then that if you're the Chargers, you got to absolutely be falling over yourself to go and turn in that card.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. The Green Bay Packers, they're a fun team for directions they could go. I predict that this is, it's either a defensive lineman or it is a corner. And I think that that's pretty clear for me. But there's been talk wide receiver could be on the table for them. Edge rusher is in that conversation, but I mean, defensive line, edge rusher. I think we are seeing a trend, Andrew, where those interior guys, if they can rush the passer, they have value placed on them at the level of some of these edge rusher prospects as well, which is why I think this might be the floor for Walter Nolan at Green Bay here. So I don't know how you stand on Walter Nolan or the Packers specifically, but that's kind of my thoughts on where they could go.
Yeah, I think Max Harrison could be in play for them if Will Johnson somehow fell. That maybe the Packers could be in play for him. I think Jedi Barron will be long gone before this time, so I don't think he'd be an option for them any longer. We haven't found a specific landing spot for Matthew Golden, I don't think, in either of our mocks necessarily that we feel super confident about. So maybe Matthew Golden is a guy that they would consider at the spot. So I'm not sure. There's several different scenarios in which I could see Green Bay going. And I think if one of the edge rushers falls, do they consider a guy like Shamar Stewart? There was another oversized guy they tried to put outside linebacker before, in Rashawn Gary, who wasn't that productive in college either because he was playing out of position. Maybe they do the same thing with a guy like Shamar Stewart. I don't know, but that's another option.
Could very well be. All right, let's get to the Vikings at pick 24. This was another spot I had a trade. I had the Chiefs jumping ahead of the Texans, and the Vikings only have 4 picks in this draft. They were willing recipients of that trade up to go get another day 2 pick and some more compensation from the Chiefs. The Chiefs come up and they take Josh Simmons right in front of the Texans in my mock. Is that a plausible scenario to you?
It is. The only thing that I'll add to this, and it's not a given, but if the other 3 tackles are going so much higher than the rest, I think that at that point we have to think about Josh Simmons potentially going as high as the top 12 as well.
Sure. Yeah. Top 15, top 18. I mean, Seattle could use an offensive tackle too. So, and a team might be Houston, for crying out loud, like you mentioned earlier, might be able to, or might be willing to trade up for Josh Simmons there too. So that was my situation, but let's talk about the Vikings specifically, since this is their picking spot. If they stick and pick, or if they were to trade back, are they looking at the secondary almost exclusively to you, or could they go a number of different directions as well?
I think secondary is an option. Max Harrison makes sense. If either of the safeties are there, Emin-Worry or Starks, I think both of those guys are in play. This is tough if you're Minnesota, because you really do need it back. You don't have that many picks in this draft. Now, fortunately, the offensive side of the ball is pretty much good to go. You can put out who you have right now, and you're pretty much fine. But that secondary needs a lot of help. And I think Trey Amos would be a great fit for their defense. I really do. If for some reason Max Harrison goes and you see a run on corners, I wouldn't rule out Trey Amos here. It's a little bit high for me, but I could understand it philosophically. And like I said, those safeties, I have a hard time believing they go anywhere other than secondary, unless they want to add some depth to the linebacker and Jahad Campbell is there, or they reach for Carson Schwessinger. I think it's got to be defense, though.
Yeah, I agree. And I have them later on in the draft. Let's see here. I have them taking Max Harrison when they actually pick in my mock at 31 from the Chiefs pick there. Houston at 25, it's best offensive lineman available in my opinion, and I don't think there's much of a conversation to the contrary if they haven't moved up for one already.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I think Houston's got to go offensive line here. The question is, who are they getting if they stay here? What if, tackle is their biggest area of need. They could add to the interior too. But if Booker is gone and Banks are gone, and I know they've done a lot of homework on both of those guys, what other guys do they love? Do they like another tackle enough to reach for, say, Josh Connerly? Or I don't think Ariante Ursery would be a big reach, in my personal opinion. I have him rated higher than some other people do. But if do they like one of them enough to take him here? This is, again, one of those picks. If they can't trade up, I'm telling you, if there is one team that I think it almost definitely will move one way or the other, is the Houston Texans. Nick Caserio loves to move up and down the draft board. If Houston is picking at 25, I will be shocked. If the pick is in, they do not try to trade out of that pick. I think you see them move one way or the other. If they can move up for a Banks, I think they'd probably do it. If he's still there at 12, that makes all the sense in the world. Get ahead of Miami, your an AFC opponent, and go up and get that guy. Get ahead of Indianapolis. If you can't do that, though, the backup tackles are not great options. Mm-hmm. So I think you'd be looking at the interior there. Maybe you could see a Donovan Jackson or someone like that potentially.
Yeah. I'm going to throw out one more plausible scenario here for Houston, because I think they're going to feel some urgency. They've won playoff games 2 years in a row now with a CJ Stroud there. And there's a connection that just makes a ton of sense to me. If they wanted to say, we're trying to maximize our window now, we need guys that can help us win now. and that starts on offensive line for us. If Armand Membu starts to slip a little bit inside that top 10, the Alabama connection there for D'Amico Ryans to maybe move up and make a big splash and go get a guy like that, that makes a ton of sense if you're trying to rock and roll this year, and add pieces for the next couple of years of cheap CJ Stroud. You're going to have to pay him in 2 years. You want to maximize some of that window. If Membu starts to fall a little bit, then that makes sense as a trade up option there for Houston too.
I agree.
All right. The Rams. Ooh, the Rams. I don't know what to do with the Rams. We were on a Rams podcast with Mark, who was the co-host there?
Mark
Andrew. Yeah. Mark Burns. And was it Isaiah? I can't remember. Sorry to the Rams Up podcast, but we appreciate you guys having us on. I think the consensus was that they wanted an offensive playmaker, but they could also go defense. They need cornerback help. Heck, they could go quarterback too. If you want to say this is like the ceiling for Jackson Dart to go in this draft, that would make sense to me. But if Shedeur Sanders is still on the board, maybe they go with something like that too. But what do you have the Rams doing in this draft, all things being equal?
Well, they're another team that needs offensive line help. I don't think they're going to necessarily be able to get it in the later portion of the first round. They're a tough team to kind of put out there. I think that they're a team ideally to move back. What team do you think could potentially move back, move up for a quarterback here if there's still one available?
Well, I think it's the Giants at this point. And Cleveland too, if it's Shedeur Sanders. But if Shedeur Sanders is gone and the Giants want to make sure that they get the 5th-year option on a guy, then I've heard that they're enamored with Jackson Dart, and that they would be willing to take him with their first pick in the 2nd round. So if they were to say, well, we can't wait that long or we're afraid somebody else is going to move up in front of us, because the Saints are compiling options to move up. And I was reading about it the other day, Andrew, since 2007, the Saints have traded up 27 times in drafts, 27 times since 2007. So they love to do it. I would not be surprised if they're the one that tries to jump into the first round and grab a quarterback again. So if it's the Giants or the Saints, that would make sense here.
See, I think if the Jackson Dart might have his own little market here, was we're hearing about how Brian Dable might prefer Jackson Dart. And the Saints definitely do not seem to be on the Shedeur Sanders bandwagon unless they're fooling everyone. So the teams that could move up might be moving up for the same guy, which could drive up the price. And that's where I think we potentially see that second quarterback go here later in the first round. The Rams are an ideal option to trade back, because if you can trade back into that early 2nd round, you feel a lot better about getting a guy like Josh Connerly at that spot as opposed to reaching for him a little bit here at pick 26. I think that's the most ideal spot. If for some reason they have to go another direction and that, they don't have any other options, they're not set at receiver long-term outside of Puka. So, I wouldn't rule out another receiver if they can't get the tight ends, if they can't get, an offensive lineman, if they don't trade up for a tight end, which I think is still possible, maybe they get a guy like a Matthew Golden here, and that would be solid value.
It absolutely would. Okay. The Baltimore Ravens at pick 27. We've got 6 more picks. We're going to bust through these real quick here. I have Nick Emmanwori lasting to pick 27. I think if he's on the board, that the Ravens would jump on that, unless like a guy like Gray Zabel's still there. Tyler Booker, if he falls to 27, I think the Ravens would run that pick up to the table too. So to me, though, it's a defensive playmaker of some kind. James Pierce Jr. would make sense here too. They like their twitchy guys off the edge. So I don't know. If you're Baltimore, you've got a litany of choices here. I have them going with Nick Emmanwori in my mock draft, but they could go a number of different directions.
Yeah, what's interesting is that Peter Schrager didn't even have Emmanwori in the first round of his mock draft, which I find intriguing. And several mock drafts have been coming out. They're seeing it drop out. It's like, is this just the one guy that we're not hearing any rumors on? He's still going to go first, but we're pushing everybody else up, so somebody has to fall out. Like, I don't know what's happened. Like, what did this guy just not interview well? Like, what happened after the combine? Buzz was that he could be a top 10, 12 option, and all of a sudden he's falling out. I don't understand why the big shift. I'm not in those meeting rooms. I mean, I've told you about my ChatGPT story where I was looking up comparisons for Tyler Booker, and it said Tyler Booker guard for the Baltimore Ravens. I was curious to see what ChatGPT could bring up with in terms of just looking back through historical data, seeing what players he's most similar to, and really when they were not that great of. I did that with several players, and they didn't really bring up any great comparisons. But it said guard for the Baltimore Ravens. I'm like, okay, there's something that AI knows that it shouldn't have known. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see what happens there.
Don't you start that rumor that the NFL draft is rigged now, Andrew. And but I guess we do know now where you get all of your insights on players. You just go to the AI and get those options in there for these guys. So, all right, moving on to the Detroit Lions. I think this is an edge rusher or bust for them. And I don't care who's left. I think that they're going to take one of them. Now, if it's James Pierce Jr., that's not quite a schematic fit. They like their bigger, longer guys on the edge there, like an Aiden Hutchinson is. I've had them pegged to or matched up with Donovan Ezeraku for a while now. It could be a Nick Scorton ceiling here. There's a few different guys that could potentially sneak into this spot for the Lions, and they could use some offensive line help. They could use a wide receiver as well. So maybe they go for the defensive end at another portion of the draft. Maybe a Kyle Kennard on day 2 or something like that would fit what they're looking for. But if they're going to play edge here, Ezeraku is a good fit. Anybody else that stands out to you as a prediction for the Lions?
I hate mocking something to the Lions because nothing seems to fit. The draft seems to be going very much against the Lions right now. They need offensive line and defensive edge help, and all those guys seem to be all of a sudden overnight just rising up boards, but while they're gone. Doesn't look like Zabel's going to be there anymore. Doesn't look like James Pierce is going to be a foregone conclusion to be there. If there's an edge rusher there, I think that's probably the first place they look. They need to get stronger there. They saw what happened to the defense once Hutchinson got hurt. They tried to replace him in several different avenues. It wasn't the same without Hutch. They need to add an extra pass rusher. But things are not long-term. You still don't know what's going to happen with Frank Ragnow. He's already considered retirement, even though he's a younger player. So if you can get someone here, I think it'd be too rich for Jared Wilson. Maybe the Lions are a team that's willing to trade out the first round and take a Jared Wilson in the second round if he's there and replace that. Or if they've got a specific guy they like, maybe this would be the ceiling, I would say, for JT Tuimoloau. Yeah. There's a name that you don't see in the first round. JT Tuimoloau to the Detroit Lions. I would not hate that.
Yep. Jordan Schultz from Fox said that that's a name to watch at this pick. So you're right on track with that. The Buffalo Bills, Andrew, you have them trading up in your mock. Was it to land Will Johnson?
Yes.
That's what you did in the Steelers mock. So I assume that those would match up. If they don't do that, is it still a corner here? I have them taking Trey Amos originally in my mock. At this point, they could be in on Max Hairston as well. There's several guys that they could look at here, but I think it's corner for them. Somebody in the secondary, they could go safety too if Nick Imamori's still there.
They could. I do think that defensive line, they also need to add to that interior of the defense.
Yes.
If they trade up, to me, Will Johnson makes the most logical sense, but I could also see them trading up for Kenneth Grant. I could see them trading up for Derek Harmon, maybe into the teams. They have 11 picks, something crazy like that, and they don't have 11 needs. So don't be surprised at all if that's the direction they go.
All right, last couple picks here. The Kansas City Chiefs at pick 31 in my mock, they had traded up to take Josh Simmons ahead of the Texans, and the Vikings are now sitting here. But if the Chiefs stay put, Ariante Ursary, Josh Connerly, those seem like guys that could sneak into the first round at this spot. They could go with a defensive tackle. If Kenneth Grant's still on the board at this point, he's gone, right? At this pick, potentially. Anybody else for the Chiefs, Andrew? You're muted.
There we go. I am muted. I think that Darius Alexander from defensive tackle from Toledo is an option here at this pick. You're looking if you go into edge rusher, this would be, I think, the absolute floor for Shamar Stewart. If he's there, Kansas City, I think, would definitely take him. But Kansas City, I've got this weird feeling they will do whatever it takes in this draft. I could see if Kansas City has to trade up to 10 or 11 to get a guy to protect Patrick Mahomes, I think they would be willing to do it. They saw first glance, they've lost 2 Super Bowls because they could not protect Patrick Mahomes. They're not going to let it happen a third time.
Yeah.
They're just not going to let it happen. I think that they will do whatever it takes, even if that means trading a future second or maybe even a first-round pick. I think that they'd be willing to do that to go up and get a Josh Simmons. So don't be surprised if some team is willing to move that far back in the first, whether that be a New Orleans at 9, Chicago at 10, the Cowboys at 12, some team like that, or maybe you have a team in the teams like Arizona if Josh Simmons is still sitting there. I think that they go up and get a guy like Simmons if they're sold on him.
I love it. I think you're absolutely right. They're playing a different game than the rest of the league. They're not looking to load up on all these draft picks. They're not looking to do anything to like build a bunch of depth. They need guys to keep Mahomes upright so he can win Super Bowls for them.
And this isn't to say that Kansas City has a perfect roster, right? Like they could add a running back at some point. Like Travion Henderson could even be in play there in most years. But they know that if Patrick Mahomes is healthy and Patrick Mahomes is protected, they feel confident they can win regardless of circumstance. He is that special of a player. That's very similar to how the Bills feel about Josh Allen. But if that's how you truly feel, you're not going to worry about your other needs. Your one need is keeping him healthy. And if you believe if you keep him healthy, you keep him upright, you give him time to throw, he can win you Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl. And the times they have protected him, they've won Super Bowl after Super Bowl. So that's the recipe for me. If I'm Kansas City, I have one need, and that's keep Patrick Mahomes healthy and keep him upright against even the best pass rushes in the league. They added Taylor, or they added an offensive tackle in free agency. I don't think that stops them from going that here, though. Yeah. Like, I think they are all in on getting protection for Patrick.
Yes, absolutely. Protect Patrick. That is the sign to hold. New movement. Yeah,
protect exactly. My adopted son.
Protect Patrick. Okay. Final pick, final team, Philadelphia Eagles here. This is a spot for a guard. This is a spot for an edge rusher, a corner even. Andrew, they could go a number of places for the defending Super Bowl champions.
They could. If Jahad Campbell's sitting there at 32, if he falls because of medical, this is another situation where Philly is just they will take the best player available. Thanks for giving them to us. If Philly has enough picks to where they could trade up as well, I don't think they'd be. We know Philly likes to trade back, but I don't think they would necessarily consider that as much this year because they already have plenty of picks. So I think they're another team to watch. Teams moving up. We're talking about all these teams. Well, nobody's wanting to move up. Well, maybe Kansas City and Philly and some of these teams where they're teams they're not making active calls because they don't want the price driven up. But if there's a certain player that falls, they already have a deal, hey, we'll throw this out at this team. And maybe you'll see some more talks over the next couple of days. Defensive line, I don't think there's any way Walter Nolan falls at this point. At one point I thought he could. I think those top defensive linemen are gone. Maybe they consider Darius Alexander if they like him enough. Tyleek Williams, that would be the ceiling, I think, for him. That 30 to 32 range, he could be in play here. Carson Schwarzenegger. They could add another linebacker there, pair him with Nakobe Dean. I think he'd be a really solid fit there. I do think the defense is the spot that they go, though. You could make an argument for offensive line. I think that they go defense, though. They could go in the secondary if a corner falls. I don't see a corner falling, but it's got to be a defensive pick for Philly.
I had them taking Nick Scorton here, so it's a very plausible thought that they would go with the best available edge rusher. They brought him in for a visit. Defensive lineman, one of those items there. You've said all along, don't let Kenneth Grant fall to pick 32. The Eagles will take him and make an all-pro out of him. That would be interesting to me there. All right, just a couple of quick hitters here, Andrew, just off the top of your head. Who's going to be maybe your top 3 biggest snubs from the first round, guys who you think had pedigree to go in the first round but won't end up going?
Well, as I'm working through this, I would definitely say Nick Emenwari could be somebody, now that I'm looking at it, could potentially fall out of round 1. Man, I tell you what, I'm looking at my big board, and I think Jahad Campbell, unless it's medical, I think he still probably goes first round. Banks is going. There's going to be a lot more guys than what I expect. I mean, I have a first round grade Matthew Golden, but I don't think he falls. too far into the second round. I think he could go second, though. Man, it's not going to be a defensive lineman. It's not going to be an edge rusher. There's too many teams that need him and want them. I think it could be a receiver, maybe a Emeka Egbuka. I think I'll find a spot to maybe fit him in, but I think Egbuka could slide. I think he's worthy of going in the first round. And then, I mean, Shedeur Sanders, you got to mention Shedeur Sanders. I'm not going to have him in the first round of my mock draft.
Yeah. Luther Burden's the guy for me right off the top of my head that I think could get the snub here. Emin Worry is one of those guys for me too. If I had to pick a third guy, it could be Will Johnson because of the issues with, all of the workouts and stuff. I don't think it's going to happen, but we've seen teams be weird about things like this in the past. So, Trey Amos, are you healthy? And we saw you run. Okay, you can be our corner. Maxwell Hairston is the fastest player in the draft. He's going to go quicker maybe. Now, Azariah Thomas could fall into the first round at the back end as well. And if that happens, maybe Will Johnson gets pushed down. So those are my three guys to watch as potential snubs here. But that's going to do it for us here on the Draft Dynasty Podcast. We appreciate you guys sticking with us here, all of you on the road to the draft. Andrew, any last words before we hit the draft? Anything you want to plug to take a look at before we go live at 8:00 tonight?
Well, check out the final big board. I'll have scouting reports for all that. If you've been following throughout the past couple months, I've been saying plug all the scouting reports. You can check them all in one spot, outside maybe Taylor Elgersma and some of the other smaller prospects that I did one on that aren't going to make the top 100. But I'll have that, and we'll have rankings. I'll have a printable PDF that you can print off if you want to follow that on draft night as well. And cross names off as they come off, so you kind of have your own board to go by on draft night. We'll have the top 300 for that, and obviously the mock draft. We'll be having some other content coming out throughout the draft as well. So make sure you check out, especially everything. If you're listening to this on Thursday, make sure you go and check out the mock draft and check out the big board. Those are the two big ones for today.
Sneaking a look at all of it because we've got a lot of content coming out, and can't wait to hear this note play for us here tomorrow or tonight.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it, Andrew, and that's going to do it for us. When we come back on the Draft Dynasty Podcast, we will be recapping the NFL draft in its entirety, and we will break it down every way from Sunday. So stay tuned. We will be back next time on the Draft Dynasty Podcast.